Good evening, welcome. My name is Laura Nieto and I'm the Director of Community Outreach at Southwest Airlines. We're so happy to have you here this evening as we have a very important discussion in honor of Human Trafficking Awareness Month. At Southwest Airlines, our heart is to take care of people because we're more than an airline, we're your neighbor. And that's why we support many community organizations much like Ayuda, who focus on human trafficking awareness. We're proud to have been a supporter of Ayuda since 2018 by providing travel and financial support of their efforts. We're thrilled to sponsor tonight's discussion as anti-trafficking work is critically important to Southwest Airlines. In addition to our work with Ayuda, we support many organizations all across the country to raise awareness of this important issue, supporting organizations that aid in the rescue, recovery, and restoration of human trafficking survivors. For those of you joining this evening who maybe are learning about Ayuda for the first time, I'd like to take a moment to share with you just a little bit more about Ayuda and their important work. They're a nonprofit organization that provides direct legal, social, and language services to help low-income immigrants access justice and transform their lives. Since 1973, Ayuda has served more than 150,000 low-income immigrants throughout Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Each year, Ayuda serves hundreds of survivors of human trafficking through their legal and social services programs. Unique in their ability to serve men, women, and children, with experience serving survivors of both labor and commercial sex trafficking, Ayuda has a depth of expertise in supporting trafficking survivors to access justice and heal from trauma. In 2021, Ayuda supported more than 390 trafficking survivors with immigration legal services and more than 80 survivors with case management, therapy, and critical services, including direct financial assistance. We're here this evening to have an important conversation and to honor the lived experiences of trafficking survivors and activists, Evelyn, Chumbow, and Ronny, Marty. Far too often during the conversations in the anti-trafficking movement, survivors aren't given a seat at the table. And by not meaningfully engaging survivors of anti-trafficking work, we truly shut out the experts. We're thrilled to have Evelyn and Ronny join us, as well as Ayuda's staff, who will discuss the holistic approach Ayuda takes in support of survivors of trafficking. So without further ado, I'd love to have the opportunity to introduce tonight's moderator, Jessica Contrera. Jessica is a reporter for the Washington Post, where she writes about people whose lives are shaped by the issues of the news. Her 2019 story about Crystal Kaiser, a sex trafficking survivor facing life in prison for the death of her abuser, helped bring international attention to the issues of affirmative defense and safe harbor. Jessica has continued writing in-depth stories about these topics and other nuanced issues involved in the response of trafficking. Most recently, she investigated the arrest and jailing of child sex trafficking victims in Nevada. Since joining the Post in 2014, Jessica has written inmate stories on teenagers impacted by mass shootings and everyday gun violence, survivors of sexual assault and harassment, and communities disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. She reported and wrote key coverage of protests following the death of George Floyd and the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Jessica is a 3-time finalist for the Livingston Awards for Young Journalist, a loyal Ohioan, and the person with too many unfinished craft projects. If there are issues or stories you think the Post should be looking into, she would be grateful to hear from you. Check out the chat for her contact information. Please join me in welcoming Jessica Contrera.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry for the entirely too long bio. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you guys for including me on this. I think the stories that Laura mentioned, they would not have been possible without organizations like Ayuda, without advocates like those on our panel today, and of course, without survivors who were brave enough to share their stories and use their lived experience to help other people. And so I'm really excited that we have all of those groups represented on the panel today. I know we're going to have a really enlightening conversation at a time, and we really need it. So I would like to introduce everyone else, and I will speed through their bios a little bit because they are far more marvelous themselves than text about them. But it's important that you know about the important work that they are doing. So first and foremost, Evelyn Chumbow. Evelyn is a survivor of child labor trafficking, who is now an anti-trafficking activist and public speaker. I know her through her work for the Freedom Network, but she also is on the board of directors at Free the Slaves, and has briefed government agencies about human trafficking from a survivor's perspective. Everybody from Homeland Security to the Department of Justice and all the other ones in between. And I'm sure more she can't even tell us about. So thank you, Evelyn, for your work, and thank you for being here today. I'm so excited to get to meet Ronny Marty. Ronny Marty is a labor trafficking survivor. He's also a certified public accountant, a hospitality manager, a business owner, and a real advocate in the anti-trafficking space. And so Ronny has used his expertise to help others through some really big and important things like the ISTAC, International Survivor of Trafficking Advisory Council, the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, and the President's Interagency Task Force to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons in the White House, and many other very influential anti-trafficking efforts. So it's a real privilege to have you here today, Ronny. I also want to introduce Gabriella Bruto and Christie Sapola, who both work at Ayuda. Gabriella is an immigration staff attorney at Iuda. She focuses on representing individuals in removal proceedings, asylum matters, UNT visas, which are incredibly important in this anti-trafficking space, and as well as special immigrant juvenile status petitions. And Gabriella received her GED from American University, Washington College of Law, and also went to Tufts University, where she studied international relations and Italian studies. I will have to talk later. I'm doing a story about languages right now, so I'm curious about that. Okay, and then Christie. Christie is a senior case manager at Ayuda, and she works with low-income immigrants to stabilize their lives and achieve their goals after surviving a crime. Many of her clients are unaccompanied minors and single moms. And besides her casework, she also manages Ayuda's client assistance programs, including a food pantry and a diaper bank. And Christie, like me, is from Ohio, went to Ohio State, and she got her degree in international studies and Spanish. So now that you know a little bit about our panelists, I'm excited to hear from them, ask them these questions that we think were important, but also if you think there are questions that you would like to ask, we do have a Q&A function, and we will do our best to get to those, but still get everybody out by 6. And so, yeah, so let's, everybody ready to get started? Okay. So, I think the first thing you learn in doing and coming into the anti-trafficking space is how important it is to put survivors at the center of that work. Couldn't be more important, but isn't just so easy as saying, okay, we're survivor centered. And so I want to ask about that issue, especially in these times when coming together, it can be more difficult. And so Ronny and Evelyn, I mean, we're so honored to have you to join us for this discussion. And I'm just hoping that you can briefly share with us, what does that word mean? What does survivor-centered mean to you? And also, how do diversity and inclusivity play a role when we're thinking about offering services to people who have experienced trafficking?
Let me go first, and I just want to really thank you guys for inviting me, having me that opportunity just to be among of amazing people. So thank you for that. And it's a great topic that we're gonna be discussing today. So that survival center, to me, what it means in my own words and the things that I've been through in working with other survivors is the first thing is has to be a place where people who were there, of course, they are proper trained on all the issues on human trafficking and trauma informed and survival approach and all those stuff. But I've been active listener. That has to have people that if they're honest, organizations sometimes there are organizations that they overpromise the things that they can do. They need to know their capability, what they're capable to do, offer to survival. So no overpromising things that are unrealistic, and instead of sometimes bringing good things like the trust and the confidence to a person, it's just gonna bring that disappointment to survivors and victims of human trafficking. And another thing that I believe is recognizing the urgent of survivors in what happened in their lives so that they can understand a little bit better. So, but yeah, taking into consideration that they need to know about their needs and what the survivors, what do they want, and so the process should start like identify the survival needs. That should be the process, and of course offer the survival a safe environment where they can feel safe and they can talk and express their feeling, which is not easy. So I think um, survival centers should be a place where they don't create those false expectations about something that might happen in the future, and by experience, I have seen organizations helping survivors with, let's say, the T visa, and they overpromise the things that it's not in their control. It's nothing that you can really guarantee that's going to happen, but they start offering things that they don't have. And it's okay. You as an organization, you don't have to have everything. We know the resources are there, but not everybody have all the resources. But that's why we're here. We have the connection, we have the network. Whatever I can offer you, gladly I will do it. And if I don't have something that you need, then I can connect you with someone that has it. But you as an organization that you don't overpromise the things to a person that, as I said, instead of bringing good stuff to that person, you're just gonna create more harm, and it's not a good thing. And of course, as survivors, as a part of, I think we as survival, we are a very essential part on the healing of the survivors, because if we help each other, it's easy, like to walk with that you can walk with someone who already survived situations. So that kind of support from another survivor is essential. I think I always say that every present has a past. So if this is my present as a survival leader helping others, I mean, I can offer my help to other survival because I was in that situation, so I know. So that is one of the biggest things that I think, and the biggest resources that we as survival can offer, but we can have to find those organizations that are doing that better work. Like I help on an organization that they have those support groups, and they do it every Friday, and they provide uh, help with the language. They are very well educated in training on the culture things, and support that they offer is via Zoom right now because of all the things that have been happening. But it's that support that a victim of survival trafficking needs at that moment, with your own language, of your own things, and that you can feel comfortable. So that's it. What I believe is the right place, like this survival center. Now, of course, that a place that can give you the chance to raise your voice, to bring your voice, and you can provide your ideas of things that you think um, I think should be done. That's the great things, and of course, um, those places I believe in, because now things have been changing. At the beginning we were advocating for, of course, housing, mental health, all needs that a victim needs at the beginning. But there is another long time process where you need to be like get some those training skills, or you want to study. some other resources that are long term will give you the independence so that you can be by your child when you reintegrate to the society. But we need that long-term services to about studies and training and job opportunities, of course. But that's what I think it's a survival center.
Thank you, Ronny, but I'm still gonna get you because Valentine's Day is coming and ladies goes first. I'm not playing with you.
Oh my
okay,
goodness.
but it's okay. We'll talk about that another day. So this month is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And so I'm gonna get you another time because you said I'm going first. You forgot there are women here. Women first. Okay, so I'll get you on that next time.
My apologies.
All right. So again, thank you for having us. Thank you for having this conversation, and truly grateful for Ayuda for having this discussion, and having survivors be in the forefront of this discussion. Again, there's been a saying, you cannot talk about trafficking without having survivor in it, and it's such a great honor to be here. And also just to say that again, human trafficking, we have to recognize, before we talk about the survivor center approach, you have to recognize that human trafficking is sex and labor. Again, we need to really reinforce this because a lot of the times when people talk about, just because it's Awareness Month, when people talk about human trafficking, they always focus on sex trafficking. So I just want to make sure that we always try to elaborate on both issues. So like my colleague, Ronny said, the center approach, just for me, the number one thing will be safety. I think Ronny mentioned it, safety. Safety is very important, as a survivor, former victim, then now a survivor. It is good to know that wherever I'm going to be safe, and whoever I'm going to talk to, I'm going to be safe. And then number two will be understanding. We can have this discussion. We always talk about this discussion. We always come here and we discuss about something. So understand the situation, understand how you can be a survivor center approach in your organizations. And, I'm so glad that we have a Southwest Airline representative here. Go Southwest. So, it's so great to have that because there's a lot we need to talk about TSA. Okay, but we'll get to that. And number three is action. We can talk all we want to say about survivor center approach, and me and Ronny can give you all these ideas, give you all these things to do, but everything that we say and do, take it into action. And take it into action. I said, Ronny mentioned it, hire us, which is great. But when you hire us, also mentor us. Don't only hire us, you have to mentor us. Again, we're all victims of certain circumstances, certain causes, but we are victims of modern day slavery, human trafficking, and that's not something that comes easy. There's a lot of people that have lost their life in these things. So if we really want to address the center approach, and I think we mentioned, our colleague from Southwest Airlines mentioned it, she talked about therapies, providing therapies. And this is something that a lot of survivors and would have really used during the pandemic. And a lot of them didn't get the opportunity to have that during the pandemic. So trauma informed. So when you talk about survival center approach, trauma informed has to be on the forefront. And I think, Jessica, thank you. You mentioned something about, diversity and inclusion. It's great. I can see we're diverse, yeah, a little bit. We're getting there, not 100%, but we're getting there. But, last year, I worked with the Human Trafficking Legal Center. We talked about, racism in the movement. We did a survey and it shows that there was a lot of racism in the movement when it comes to trafficking, and if you type human trafficking on Google right now, you're a reporter, go and type human trafficking on Google right now. What are you gonna see? Faces of white women, faces of white women. So are we truly diversity and inclusion there when we talk about trafficking? Are we really addressing all person from all background when it comes to trafficking. So a lot of the times there are people from other countries that don't feel like their story is going to be heard, because they only see certain faces that are addressing this issue of trafficking. So we really have to reconsider when we mean survivor-centered approach, especially when it comes to the diverse part. We really have to look into that. So we can say all of this, but take it into action. I don't want to talk too much. I want to give time for more questions and things like that. But that is my approach on the survivor-centered approach. And Ronny said it, hire us. So Southwest Airlines, I know y'all hiring. So get us there. Thank you.
Thank you both. You both brought up things that are really, I think, quickly overlooked sometimes, specifically the services aspect and what those services look like Evelyn talking about therapy. So Gabriella and Christie, could you please jump in and talk about what holistic services actually looks like without overpromising, as Ronny said? What is realistic for someone who's thinking, okay, I might be ready to get help or contemplate getting help. Like, what is out there?
Thank you. And thank you to Evelyn and Ronny. I really appreciated hearing everything you had to say. So yeah, I'm Christie. I'm a senior case manager at Ayuda in our social services department. And I work a lot with survivors or victims of trafficking on the day-to-day. And yes, so the importance of holistic services. One great thing about Ayuda is that we provide a variety of services to survivors, such as legal, mental health services, and case management services. And I think that that is super important, or I know that's super important, because the trauma of trafficking, a lot of times clients will come to us and it is a struggle just to get to our office, or just to reach out to one person for help, or just to even remember different names, different places they're supposed to be, schedule appointments. And something like having Ayuda or other organizations like that provide everything, or not everything, but a lot of things in one place, is super helpful for the survivors themselves. If you can just walk across the hall to your attorney's office, once you were in your therapist's office, it makes things a lot easier. And also for communication between the different people who are supporting the survivors. Like, for example, recently I had a client who was a client that we thought was only a survivor of domestic violence. She had an attorney at Ayuda too. And then after getting to know the client more and just getting to know her, it came out, or I had a strong suspicion that she was also being trafficked, labor trafficked by her partner, who was her trafficker. And, I kind of dinged a little red flag in my head. And so then I was able to, because of the holistic services we provide, speak to her attorney and be like, hey, I think that maybe she's going through labor trafficking too. Could you assess her for that? And it turned out yes. And they started working on a T visa application for her as well. So Ayuda's not the only place that does that, not trying to say that, but something like that is super special and I think can be really helpful for clients, because that is one less thing, that they have to take off their plate. We can communicate between us. And with that, I liked what Ronny said about not over-promising. So for example, at Ayuda, we have mental health, case management, and we have legal and language access. But it's important to know the limitations of that, like for case managers, and not to promise to a client oh yeah, we can also get you clothes, we can, help you medically here, or our legal team is totally open to referrals and they have capacity. That is super important not to overpromise to clients. So it's really important to also make connections within the community to different organizations, strong connections, so that we can easily refer clients to people that we already know can provide those services better than us. So that's what I would say about holistic services. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with Christie. And a lot of the stuff, I think that my thoughts are similar, but I think it's so important. Like Christie said, I think we underestimate the value of even having both services, because honestly, we have clients or potential clients that come in maybe seeking the social services aspect of it, right? And because our case managers are trained to some extent, right, and being able to see these red flags, we get the referrals from legal. The reality is that because there is truthfully a lot of like lack of education, like Evelyn said, right, it's not just sex trafficking. There's sex trafficking and then there's labor trafficking. But I think when you don't have the background or the information, like a lot of us, like, right, even before I went to law school, or before I actually started practicing this, like if you asked me what trafficking was, my immediate thought was to like, well, we know as sex trafficking and not labor trafficking. So I think having our case managers, know these kind of signs to look in terms of other kind of trafficking has really opened up opportunities for clients that have walked in, because the reality is that like, we're not going to have a client walk in seeking a consult for immigration purposes and know like, oh, I've potentially been a victim of trafficking or I'm a survivor of trafficking. And I think that is what makes, at least for us, right, at Ayuda, having both in one place so important. And the same way too, right, I've also had it the other way go around. I do a consult for immigration purposes because somebody did come in seeking that. And once I get working, I think it's so important to remember that just because somebody has, for example, a legal matter, life doesn't happen. And there's so many other resources that they need to be able to be okay. Because the reality is also that when you have so many other things going on in your life, you can't focus on maybe this. And like, I think having a place where I know that I can refer to for other services has really helped me, because like, I know that even if I ask my client, oh, I need an appointment because I need you to come, I can't just assume they can stop everything to come now, because I know they have a lot going on in their life. So I do have a client who I actually initially just started providing legal services for her for a T visa. But then as we were working, I was able to refer her to social services. I was able to help her, right, with rent money, and again, I think it's knowing our limitations. Through her case manager, she was able to seek some like a dental appointment because that's a service she needed. And again, I think at this point, and I do actually appreciate, Ronny, you saying like the importance of not over promising. And I kind of take that personally to heart. Like a lot of times my clients have questions for me, and I honestly, like, I don't know the information that, like, for example, a case manager does, right? Like, so when she asked, like, she's like, I need a dentist, I wanted to help her. So I did go ahead, and she had already a case manager. So I'm like, you know what, like if you talk to your case manager, they might be able to help you with that. And sure enough, right, we don't have dentists we work with, but case managers have the resources and the information that I don't to that extent. So I think it does allow us to support our clients beyond the one thing we are representing them on. And you know, I hope, right, like Ronny and Evelyn, only you two can really speak to that is something that is of value to you guys.
Thank you both so much. Hopefully that gives people a good idea of what might be possible if they are looking for help. But I really want to go back to something that Evelyn brought up, and that is so important to talk about today, because, you know, certainly we know that anybody can be a victim of sex or labor trafficking, but that there are vulnerabilities and disproportionate impacts that matter and that we need to talk about. And so, Evelyn, can you tell us about how racial discrimination impacts the both experience of human trafficking and the services provided, and how inequalities that already existed have been exacerbated by the pandemic? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you, Jessica. So I'll just give an example. You know, I'll give one example, but just to refer back to the first example that I gave when I said, if you Google human trafficking and you click on images, what type of images do you see? Who are the folks that you see? I remember, you know, me and Ronny, you know, we served on the U.S. Advisory Council that we were nominated by Barack Obama. And then we're nominated by Barack Obama. And then the former president, you know, the former president that, you know, took over the office had a discussion on human trafficking, and there again, we were right there, we are nominated to advise the White House administration on trafficking, and it was very diverse. I would say we were diverse, Latin America, African and Asian, it was mixed. To me, it was diverse, but when the former president had a discussion on human trafficking, and we saw it on, I saw the television, I was mostly like white women, like white blonde women that he brought to the White House. And I'm just like, okay, but we're right there. We are very diverse, and we want to talk about human trafficking. We want the whole world to know that it affects everybody from around the world. So why is this, person having a discussion on trafficking, and it's just, young white women and mostly blonde? So that really affected us. I think Ronny can speak on that a little bit. We were very upset, that to the point that I was pointed to write a letter, and I wrote a letter, so which is why I say diversity is very important, because there can be someone that is from, that is not white, a people of color, that is going through a trafficking situation. But if they see an image like what I just mentioned and is seeking help, and the hotline is there, they will be afraid to want to call that number because they're not sure they're going to help them. And then diversity is also important in the services like Ayuda. Like if I want to go to Ayuda, it would be nice to know that there's somebody that will understand what I'm saying, because I might not be speaking the language is important. Language is very important. And I think Ronny touched on this a little bit. Language is very important in this movement. And a lot of the times, the language barrier makes it hard for some victim to get the assistance that they need, because there's not enough that, not the person cannot understand what that person is saying, and also a lot of times when it comes to survivors providing training for human trafficking, there are survivors that provide training, but if you get to see the folks that are providing the training, it's mostly survivors of sex trafficking, not someone like Ronny or I, which, we're from another country. It's usually not foreigners, it's usually American survivors that go and provide trainings for even airlines, and so how are other victims that are from this other country will be able to get help if all they see is just one type of people showing face, and they're not sure that, oh, this person is going to help me, or someone from the airline will understand, because the airline only got their training from a sex trafficking survivor. Because like, again, for my situation, I came to this country age 9 from Cameroon. I would say that maybe, I don't know, but I was very young. I always tell everybody my goal was to marry Will Smith. I'm still praying, coming to America. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now, this is the story how my life got twisted upside down. So, if that, that flight attendant, and everybody on that flight attendant were mostly white, because I came here in the 90s. So I didn't know if I was able to speak or say something. And even when I landed, at the airport, again, I didn't see anybody that was like me, except my trafficker that the flight attendant took me to. My trafficker, she was a African woman, but that was based in the US. So diversity is very important, and we need to have this organization hire a lot of people that are diverse, and hire survivors like Ronny and I that are able and ready to just help other victims. Because even right now, I have a victim that reached out to me because they knew that I was from Cameroon, and they reached out to me for help. And a lot of times victims, they can, victims of trafficking feel more comfortable talking to survivors. We love you guys advocate, we love the attorneys, but most victims, they feel comfortable talking to somebody that have gone through it. So diversity is very important. Racism has definitely played a big part in this movement. And, you know, we did a survey on it. Fairness, the PINKA, we did an article. I'm going to share that. You guys can read more on that and look at the survey that I did with the Human Trafficking Legal Center to just learn more about it and to see what the survey has said from the survivor community. So I will share that with you guys. That way people can read more on it. Ronny, do you want to say anything on that?
I want to ask Ronny a question directly, if that's okay.
No,
I want to jump in and because we're trying to touch on so many topics today, and I'm hearing the things that you say relate directly so much to this next topic, because it's about this question that I'm sure you guys get and that I have started to get now that I have been writing about this issue for some time, which is, what do I look for, right? So what do I look for if I want to help stop trafficking? I'm a person out in the community. I'm a mom posting on Facebook, right? What do I look for? And I think, what Evelyn is bringing up with, what is the picture of human trafficking that we're putting out there into the world can so distort and miss opportunities. I think about juries and I think about this question. So Ronny, like, you know that a lot of these like red flags, right? We know that those can lead to discrimination, but that just because these conversations and these things are layered doesn't mean we can't also teach people how to help. So I'm curious if you could talk about that, thinking about some of the things that Evelyn just brought up too. Can you share with us what you think are the most important things that members of the community can do to keep themselves and others from becoming vulnerable to being trafficked, or what they can do to help those who are currently experiencing trafficking?
Thank you so much. And as Evelyn said, I mean, it's people, the first things to me is we got to understand people, they need to be aware, to have the right information. And so first things is to know about human trafficking and how did it happen, what did it happen, why it happened, and who do it happen. So first things to me the community should do is be aware of that. If they don't have that information, they don't have any organizations or survivors around there to show them or train them, they can look for help in others. Could be called a county, another state. We're all connected. What I say is the community to be informed about what is human trafficking first, so that they can start looking for those red flags, so that they can identify potential victims of trafficking. And then they need to be able to understand and report where to report it. And once they know what is human trafficking, where to report it, what to look for and where to report it, so they spread the word within the community. And it's just like, let's say, in my community, I was providing a training on human trafficking. The first things when I spoke my mouth about saying that I'm a survivor of human trafficking, people look at me like I was a survivor of sex trafficking. I didn't even say what I was. It was labor of sex trafficking. But there was a lady while I was just teaching and providing the training, that she said, is that true that most of the victims and sex trafficking in this case, they are white, and all the people who actually work in the sex industry, they are Black and Latinos? Is that true that it's a high percentage that victims are more white? I was like, where did you get that information from? So I told her I have to go back to you with the question so that I can talk to her in private about what is human trafficking and what includes sex and labor trafficking, and any kind of person, white, brown, yellow, whatever color you wanna say. But the first thing is not to profile anyone. Anyone could be a victim of human trafficking. So once you spread the word, because you have the knowledge about human trafficking in your community, all right? So what you gotta do after that is keep telling your friends and your family and at your workplace, hey, I was in a training where they were talking about human trafficking. Have you heard about that? because when you speak about human trafficking, it's just sex trafficking. So that we can actually educate our community. When they ask, hey, how can I help? Of course. I mean, we're gonna have a conference and we're gonna have a training. And if they can really in that community have it, they can contact another organization. I'm pretty sure that they will send someone to do it or will send someone to send the information. And nowadays via Zoom, it's easy to provide those training, which is not a big deal. So, but they also as community, because people ask you, but they are truly asking you because they want to help. And they need to volunteer. You want to know? Get involved. Get involved and let me see how it works. You know, how can I help my community? How can I help myself and my family? How can I be protected? How can I actually help others? But get involved. Go into your community and volunteer to do the work with, which is, let's say, social work and work about human trafficking. And of course, just get informed, you know, everything what's going on. And as I said, you know, training and education on human trafficking is the most important thing. So that's what the community, to me, they gotta do in order to really help if they wanna help. But don't profile anybody thinking like, oh, just Latino, just African American, or just the Asians, they are the one. It could be anyone. So just the white could be victims, the others might be, you know, they want you to do that. So there's, I mean, it's conceptions of what is human trafficking. Nowadays, still, you talk about that, it is just people just taking a wrong way. And that's why community, they need to get involved little by little. If we spread the word, I'm pretty sure more people are going to be aware and more people will be able to help, as they say. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriella, Christie, Evelyn, I'm sure that there are things that you wish that you could just help everyone understand about the misperceptions when it comes to human trafficking. What do you think are the ones we should highlight here?
I think I had mentioned it first. It's just understanding that human trafficking is not only sex, and it doesn't only involve one particular type of people. You know, it can be anybody. I think Ronny mentioned it, because again, even the media sometimes fails to, you know, portray what human trafficking is all about. A lot of the times people think, okay, it's only folks in the massage parlor or, you know, a Chinese restaurant. It's more than that. And that's why it is good, like Ronny said, to just get training, you know, on this, have the community involved, do more outreach on the issue, because I would say the media has really done some damage when it comes in explaining what human trafficking is all about, like the misconception of human trafficking. Even some movies, like, no offense, I love Taken, and I wanted a Liam Neeson father. But the first one was true, but not the whole series. You know, it just became a thing. So human trafficking is not only, you know, something like, you know, Taken. Yes, there was some truth, you know, to it, but we have to look at that. Trafficking is more than that. You know, is domestic servitude, people working in mine, you know, even people that work in a house are always sexually exploited as well, you know, and we need all these faces to be represented when they're talking about trafficking. We need the real stories, and your reporter, Jessica, try to make it out there for us.
I want to just add something what Evelyn said. And Evelyn, you remember that so well when we do one of those regional trip with the Bachelor Council that we went to Minnesota, remember? And we were a group of panelists, all of us, we were labor trafficking survivors. When it happens, let's say at 4 o'clock, by 6 that the news were out there, a group of sex victims of trafficking. It was like crazy. Like we couldn't believe what was happening. It happened in one of the university, right in Minnesota, and I couldn't believe that. Really, we're just talking about this guy. You're not listening.
Yeah.
Reporters, they put that on the news right away. Victim of sex trafficking.
You're right, Ronny. And to just add to what Ronny says, we need people that work in this movement, let's stop trying to separate the issue. And I said it a lot of the time, because you're also dividing the survival movement by saying, hey, sex trafficking is more important, labor trafficking is more important. If we want to talk about diversity, because when I present about my story, I try to include sex trafficking as well, you know. So if we are separating the issue, a lot of the times that's where you have this division. And even the media does a great job in showing that, like, there's many cases on sex trafficking. We're not going to talk about the people, you know, and one of them is still, I'm sorry, it's my favorite singer, you know, but you know, how come I have not seen a big labor trafficking case out there and there've been so many on it? Is it because it involves sex? I just feel like the word sex just transfers more, you know, because how come we can't talk about folks in Ohio, you know, the farms that there are, you know, kids that were taken from Guatemala, you know, and working in the farm. Why can't there be a big media headline on that? But we arrest someone on sex trafficking, but when it comes to labor trafficking, the media just really shut down, and it makes it such a big division.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think there's a question from the audience that directly addresses, you know, that next logical question with that, right? Is when we're sharing stories, whether it's from a reporter, from an organization, and it seems like the question is coming from somebody who's an advocate who might be asking for a client's story, right? The question is, in an effort to approach clients who might be survivors of trafficking in an empathetic, trauma-informed way, how do you, the way they phrased it is, how do you best get information for a legal case or other reasons from a client? So basically, how do you have this person tell their story without re-traumatizing them? What is the best way to address triggering topics without causing further harm to our clients who have already suffered this kind of trauma? That is from the questioner. And Evelyn is raising her hand.
I know we're not in school, so just raising their hand. That's a very good question. Again, I'll use my story as, you know, as an example. I think I mentioned this. The first thing is just making sure that the victim is saved, you know, and again, depending on the type of trafficking situation, the community, and where this victim is from, they want to know that they're going to be able to be, they're safe. Their safety is really important, you know, and I guess another number one to me is also trust. Because for me, it is hard to trust people, you know, because my dream was to come here to marry Will Smith, as you all know, but nobody told me that I would come and be a victim of, you know, of modern day slavery, you know, in America. So it is hard for us that have gone through this to be able to trust. And you have to give us, if you're an attorney, you're working on this case, you're an investigator on the case, and you want that victim to really open up, give them a reason to trust you. Mm-hmm. And I do understand that you're doing your job, you know, but sometimes this type of job is a job that requires compassion, because you're dealing with human beings and their life was taken away. Their everyday thing that they were doing was taken away. So it was so good to have an attorney. And guess what? Ayuda was involved in my case, you know. So, you know, at that time, you know, I had, you know, a lawyer that is like a mother to me. Her name was Melanie Unhurt, and she worked for Ayuda, you know, and there were other people that also worked for Ayuda at that time. But Melanie gave me a reason to trust her, you know. She made me feel free to be able to open up and even tell her things that I didn't want to tell a lot of people, you know, because I was scared. Because the law enforcement that was on my case that was accusing me of wanting green card to stay in the country. Sorry, law enforcement, I didn't know what green card was. I didn't know that you need a green card to stay in the country. I just thought I was coming for Will Smith. I said it several times, but Melanie gave me that reason to trust her, to be able to just say whatever to make this case go through and for the case to be investigated. And I was very open. I shared my story. I told them, I gave them examples and things like that, because Melanie was very compassionate when she was talking to me. She would, and she was a white woman, and I just she just gave me that reason to trust her. And there's even a song that when I think of her, Nelly, is getting hot in here, because she just made it free for me, and I can never, to this day, I'm not telling you my age, I'm 36, but I still, when I talk to her, I just see her as a mom, so please, if you're working in this moment, you want to help a victim, give them a reason to trust you, be compassionate, because they will tell you the truth. That way you can get this case right. Because again, my case was investigated all the way back to Cameroon, because I had people that I could trust, and they also show compassion. Because even the investigator of my case went to Cameroon and brought pictures of my parents, and he brought so much memories of me. So please have trust and compassion to that question.
Pretty quick, I just want to add on what you said about compassion is the main ingredient on that thing. Make the victim to feel that uh, first safe, that it's safe, that you're gonna be there just to listen, to be a listener, and whatever they want to talk about, you're not gonna force them to say whatever they don't want to say. Whatever you feel comfortable with, make them feel like Evelyn said, like that you trust the person that is interviewing you or is talking to you. But it's so important that that sensitive and that compassion be there, but truly be there by be a good listener, so that person can really start opening to you. And of course, you need to be, of course, well trained about trauma informed. So because you don't want to re-traumatize the victims by asking questions, so uncomfortable questions that that gonna hurt that person. So that's what it is.
Thank you for that, Ronnie. Definitely re-victimizing and being trauma informed. Yep. Because again, on that note, one thing I didn't like in my case was, I know they were doing their job, but I had scars in my body. So I had to take off my clothes that way they could take pictures to show in the court. But I kind of felt dehumanized a little bit on that, but you know, maybe they just didn't know the right approach. And I know that they wanted to do their job, but it really did kind of hurt me that I had to take off my clothes in front of, certain people, because I wasn't comfortable, yet. That way they can show, the scars that I had, that my trafficker did. But yeah, try your best to not re-victimize them. It's very important.
I think we have some people watching right now who work for hotlines that respond to trafficking and other issues. And so one of them wrote in and asked specifically for the survivors, what would be important for a human trafficking hotline volunteer or a hotline manager to know? What would you want them to know?
My number one, do they understand the issue? And have they been trained? And are they able to speak another language besides just English? So are they fully trained? It's good to be a volunteer, but can we have volunteers that also speak different dialect, have a translator when you're dealing with a hotline? Because a lot of the time, communication is such a big issue in the movement because of the language barrier. I just became, you need that. And then you need the training. Even me, myself, as a survivor, don't just hire me because I'm a survivor, but I also need to be trained to be able to help the victim, and also need to understand that language that the victim is speaking. It is very important if you're dealing with a hotline.
And also just want to add to, I think the main thing or the main ingredient would be to love people and to care for people. Once you care for people, you're gonna go your extra, and you're gonna be trained and fully trained in what you need to do to respond to those people in need or in that situation. But you need to care about people first, truly.
Christie and Gabriella, I was just wondering if there was anything that we didn't get to, since we only have a few minutes left, that you think, would be valuable for people who are trying to get more involved in these spaces, in the anti-trafficking movement, and things to be mindful of going into that work, knowing that you do not have the same lived experience as somebody who is a survivor.
I can go ahead. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ronny and Evelyn. Honestly, like even me listening to you, it's like so helpful because obviously I'm doing that work on the other side, but I have not lived your experiences. So I think along with that, to your question, honestly, I think training, and I think that's something that's like very important. I do think there is training that needs to be done in order to be trauma informed, and I think that's something that like we do our best, and we're definitely not perfect as the advocates. But I think hearing it from you, right, and how important that is. And, I really appreciate everything you said. And I think just to one of the points that both Ronny and Evelyn did, I think when I work with clients, like for me, it's important to work at the speed that my client is comfortable with, because you're right, Evelyn, I need to be able to build that trust with the client so that they're willing to open up to me. So I think just having all that trauma and informed training, and I love what I do, and so like I do, but I can see your point, Ronny, that you need to truly care before you're able to do this kind of job well.
Yes. Again, everything Evelyn and Ronny said was excellent. I found myself nodding like a crazy person, like over and over, like, yeah. And Gabriella too. I'd say important for anyone who wants to get involved in the movement. Yeah, connect with different local nonprofits in your area that are doing work already with survivors. And super important, if you're working directly with survivors and you have never been through trafficking yourself, never assume, never put yourself on their level. You are, taking a back seat, and what the survivor wants and what the survivor needs is way more important than what you think they might need or might want. So just always being survivor centered, listening to them, like Gabby said, going at their pace. Personally, like in social services, a lot of times intakes will ask like all these invasive questions, and if it's not urgent, trying to just let the survivor open up about these questions about their trafficking situation when they're ready. Like I don't have to be talking to them about it on the first appointment, second, it can be months in the future. So that's what I'd say. Just always be doing all your work with the survivor completely in the center.
Thank you so much. We're just about done, but I just want to close with Ronny and Evelyn. Is there any other issues that we didn't get to today, or kind of closing remarks that you would want to leave people thinking about?
Yeah, so for me again, my closing remarks, let's just remember, as we're having different discussion when it comes to human trafficking, let's try to address both issues, labor and sex trafficking. And most importantly, the pandemic really hit the entire world. It affected a lot of people. But I would tell you that as a survivor of human trafficking, it definitely affected me in a way that I could never imagine, not to even think about the victims that are still working in like farms, that are stuck in a house, stuck in the Bruto. How are they, handling it? How they're not even able to escape because of, this new pandemic that we're dealing with. So, it really affected a lot of people, but survivors and victims of human trafficking, they have dealt with it in the worst way possible. And I know in the movement we were not prepared for such things to happen, but going forward, I think organizations need to be able to have great resources when it comes to whatever next pandemic we're running into, just have come up with solutions that we will be able to help survivors and victims if we do go into another pandemic. Because I think we talked about therapies. It would have been great to know that I could get free therapy that I didn't have to pay for. But last year I had to pay, and the year before that I had to pay for therapy. And, because my situation happened, I was locked in the house taking care of 2 kids. I was a mother at such a young age. And then now I am forced to stay in the house for a whole 2 years, helping my son in school and still working. And then my trauma just raised up like crazy. So my closing remarks is, let's come up with other resources to help survivors and victims of human trafficking. And let's really try to be more diverse on this issue, and actions speak louder than words. Thank you.
Just 2 lines, I'm just gonna add to that. So to close, I notice we are over 6 right now, but what Evelyn said, I mean, I know we were not prepared for the pandemic. Nobody budgeted what, extra money to respond to the needs in that situation. So that was a lesson that we need to learn from and to create a plan for next pandemic, that we need to get ready and have the right resources just as a backup in case something happens. And of course, you guys at Ayuda, you've been great. So if anybody wants to learn more, just get in contact with Ayuda.
Thank you.
And sorry, Jessica, I just opened the thing. I saw a question. I know I have to drop off because I have another panel, but there's a question from Grace Wong. Where can businesses find, my favorite topic, find survivors to hire for work? And is there a network of some sort? So Grace, just a quick answer. I'll be working with the Human Trafficking Legal Center, and I'm working on helping create services to help survivors get employment. So you can reach out to a colleague at Ayuda to get my email address, because that's something I'm on top of. I want survivors to get jobs. I want them to be working and making good money. So thank you for that question, Grace.
Awesome. Okay. I know I have to wrap up, but thank you, everyone. Thank you, Evelyn and Ronny, first and foremost. Obviously, but the way people are responding, your answers have been super insightful and from the heart and meaningful. So thank you. Thank you to Southwest Airlines for sponsoring, for Iuda for making it possible for all of us to be here today, especially for Gabriella and Christie to be here today and doing the work that they do every day. I think that Nikita is going to drop some information in the chat about upcoming Iuda events, and that for anybody who's interested in asking that question of how do I get more involved, they put out a monthly newsletter that I get to always know what they're up to. So that's a great place to start. And I will also drop in the chat my email, so that if there are stories or topics or anything that you feel like the Washington Post should be looking into, you can please reach out to me, and I will do my best to get you connected to the right person or just to listen. So thanks, everybody. This was awesome.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.